Hello, my name's Henry. Tonight I'm going to be talking about a little bit of time travel. This occurred when I was probably about between 3, 4 years old. And my dad and mom, as you know, that they sold me into these projects. And it involved time travel and different things. But time travel was the main thing. And for me being in the projects, I only went back in time. I never went forward. So somehow my dad got wind of it, and he decided that he too was going to use me. And knowing anything about a father and a son, most times the son will look up to his dad like he's some kind of a hero. And I was one of those kids. I've done anything back in those days for my dad, just for his attention and love. So, anyway, the little village that we lived in was right there on the highway, and you go north 7 mile and there was a town there, or you go south 7 mile and there was a town there. But back in those days, we always done a lot of business north of where we lived on the highway at that town. Back in those days, things were fairly cheap. That was before the end of the mom and pop stores. We done a lot of business at places like that. Support hometown and the small town villages. So every day we'd wait, mom get up and go to work. In the afternoon, about 2 o'clock, she'd leave. She had to be at work by 3. So me and my dad would sit around and he'd be contemplating on who he wanted to go see. So, anyway, we'd be sitting around there antsy as hell until she left, and then we'd walk down the easement to this barn, and that's where we kept our horses out in there. And I always thought it was kind of funny, we always took my horse. So, again, we went and saddled up the horse and checked it over and headed out to the highway and rode the grass along the highway. Now you got to understand, my horse was well broke. Nothing spooked that horse. Cars, you could shoot while he was on his back. Nothing fazed him. He was a gelding, which means he was neutered. So just in case you don't know what that means. But we headed up the highway and come to this house. Dad pulled back on the rein and the horse kind of stopped. He goes, I know what you've been doing in the projects. I got wind of that. And, if you really want to do something special for your old dad, let's see if you can take me through a portal to that house right there. It's no problem. When do you want to go back? He said when those people was alive. So I just took a random guess. I said, okay. Head toward the house, cut across the highway to the house. He goes, but I don't see nothing. I said, you will. So I set my vibration to the vibration that would get down to the frequency to open up a portal. And we rode across the highway there, and it looked like these vapors that you see come across these highways when it gets real stinking hot, especially like in the desert. You can see them real good. As we rode across, it seemed like the temperature kind of changed a little bit. When we got to the other side of the highway there, these people were sitting out there on their porch. Yard was all mowed. But just before that, when we were sitting there looking at the house, there was weeds and no windows in the house, and it had been vacant for years. But after we got across the highway, there was no car sitting in the driveway from like the 1950s. People were sitting there on the porch, and I just kept looking, and to me it was normal because, I was born in a tube and given to my parents, so it wasn't nothing new. It was just something that I could do. So as we rode up to the gate, they had a fence around the yard with a little fence gate. Got off the horse and tied him up to one of the posts there by the fence, and he started eating grass. So we opened up the gate and walked in, and they knew my dad. They called him by name and asked how he'd been doing. Just like, it was yesterday. And my dad spoke to each of them, called them by name. As we approached the porch, the lady looked at me and she goes, "I got some lemonade in there in the fridge cooling. Got a nice slice of cake in there too, and some cookies, homemade ones. Why don't you come in and we'll get you a lemonade and get your dad a beer. You can get you a slice of that cake and some cookies." Well, heck yeah, I was a kid, man. I love sweets. Still do. So I followed this lady in. I won't be using their names because they've been long since passed on, and I don't want their families coming back on me. But I followed her in. She said, "Here, take this here beer out to your dad real quick, and I'll get a saucer out, and we'll make you a little plate." Okay, so I took the beer out to my dad, and of course, his brand of beer was past Blue Ribbon. That's all that man drank. Drank that right up until the day he died. So I come running back in, my little cowboy boots on, and my little billfold in my back pocket. She set me a saucer down there and table, and I got up on the table and she put a little booster seat there, and I climbed up on it, and she pushed me up to the table. I was sitting there eating my cake. She got another little saucer out and put my cookies on it. And I was sitting there talking to her and eating. My dad was out talking to the old man on the porch. So when I got done, she goes, "I'll put your cookies in a paper sack, a lunch sack." She said, "My husband, he takes lunch out to the back in the field, and we got all kinds of these little lunch sacks. That be all right?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So I sat there and she put them in a paper sack for me, and we proceeded to go outside, and me and her sit on the glider. Dad and this guy sat there in these chairs, and they was talking up a storm, so we was sitting there just listening, and God, it was nice that day. Nice cool breeze. Skies were blue, sun was out. Not a care in the world. After about 2 or 3 hours, Dad said we'd better go. So I grabbed my little sack, and he put me up on the saddle, and he climbed aboard, turned the horse, and just before we got to the driveway, he turned and looked, and I could see a tear running down his cheek, and he waved and said, "Well, we'll come back sometime soon." So we turned back around to head across the highway and seen those vapors again. Went through the vapors and come out on the other side and turned and looked. The old house was like I'd always seen it. There was nobody living there. Windows were not in it no more. Car was gone. Yard was all a mess. Fence was all rusted looking. So we went on around and made the big circle. Took a back road or two and come out up by the house, and Rode back into the little village cluster of houses there and took the saddle and blanket off the horse and the bridle. Put him in his stall and gave him a good drink and a little bit of hay and grain, and we walked just about a block or two to the house. Dad didn't say nothing. He seemed like he was in a better mood. So he just doted all over me. Well, I ate that like it was candy. Dad said, you better eat those cookies and throw that damn sack away, because your mom finds out we're both going to be in the doghouse. I didn't understand. So I did as he said, because I didn't want to make him mad. It was almost like he was worshiping me. I didn't realize I was being used. So I did as he said. I buried that paper sack down in the bottom of the trash can. Laid down there and fell asleep. Next thing I know, it's morning. So, Mongo said, what did you guys do yesterday while I was at work? And I started to speak up. My dad elbowed me and was like, shh, be quiet. He said, oh, we went and messed around with the horse and went on a small horseback ride. And I started to speak up again, and he goes, shh, be quiet. Don't tell her that. She won't understand. Said, okay. I just sat there, and she goes, you seem like you got something you want to say. I was like, oh, no, I was just going to tell you that we took good care of the horses. Then we'd come home and messed around the yard till time to go to bed. She goes, okay. Dad looked at me and winked, smiled a little bit, pat me on the back. She turned her back, and he looked and leaned down, and he goes, good job, good job. Well, hell, I was proud. I'd done something to make him happy. Just like any young boy would have done, you know. Of course, I didn't know I was young and stupid. I didn't know he was just using me. Didn't really care about me, he was just using me. So, next day comes along, same thing. We ride back to that house. And there it is, all empty and ragged looking. He goes, how about one more time? And he said, then we'll leave early. And he said, down the road a little way, there's another house I want to stop at. I said, sure. So, we rode back through that, looks like a vapor, across that highway. And sure enough, house was all fixed up, nice painted, and nice yard. Old cars sitting in the driveway from the 1950s, and them two old people out there sitting on the porch. And I thought it was kind of funny. We'd just been there yesterday, and the real funny part was, this man and woman somehow remembered my name. Of course, back then they called me Little Henry. So Dad picked me up and set me off the horse, and then he climbed off, tied the horse up, and we went through the gate just like we did the day before. Started talking to him, and the lady said, well, Little Henry, one of these days you'll be big enough you ride by yourself. Your dad's going to have 2 horses. And I started to speak up and say, well, we got 2 horses. We just rode the one, but my dad made me be quiet about it. So I went along with it. Didn't say nothing. She goes, I got some fresh bread made. That's what kind of bread you got? She goes, banana bread. Well, hey, man, I'm on that. I was on that like a dog on a bone. I followed her in the house. She got me some lemonade out. Give me a can of beer to take to my dad. I was sitting there eating that there bread, talking to the missus, while Dad was out there shooting the shit on the porch. So I finished my food, grabbed my lemonade, and me and the missus walked out on the porch. And we took a seat over on the glider, like we did yesterday. She said, "It's some weather we're having, ain't it, Henry?" I said, "Yeah, it is. It's nice." I said, "The horse ain't even sweating." I said, "That really makes it good." I said, "Even though people think this is silly, I always like the smell of leather and horse sweat. Don't ask me why. It's a smell that you can once you smell it, and if you like it, you can't get it out of your nose. It's always there. I'll probably go to my grave smelling that smell. Bring back a lot of memories." So we sitting out there, and she goes, "Been thinking about planting some new flowers out there along the road by the ditch." She said, "I just got to figure out, do I want to plant peonies or do I want to plant flags?" I said, "Well, personally, I like those peonies. They get them big old giant red flowers, sometimes the white, sometimes the pink." I said, "But I guess it's all in what somebody likes." I said, "But I love the smell of their peonies. They come back every year." I said, "Besides that, the bees, the ants kind of like them." And I said, "They just look good." She goes, "Well, yeah, we could probably put a whole row of those." I said, "They would look really pretty." So we was sitting there talking about flowers. My dad said, "Hey, y'all need to quit ratchet jawing over there. You like a bunch of old geese." He said, "We need to get going." So I thanked the lady for the hospitality and the good eats. I was headed out to get the gate, and she goes, "Now, Henry, now we ain't that far away. Y'all come back soon. We'll be watching for you." "Okay, thank you, ma'am." We got back on the horse, cut across the steam-looking deal on the road, the vapor. As soon as we got to the other side and looked back, it was right back dilapidated. No car, no people, windows out. Looked like it hadn't been lived in for years. It wasn't nothing new to me. So we rode on north down the road, and there's this old house that's set way back off the road. Great big huge home, 2-story, antebellum looking home, had the big 4 pillars in the front, concrete driveway, and a walkway that was concrete, went all the way out to the mailbox. Now this is out in the rural area. I guess back in those days that was common. But we rode along that old lane, and on each side was these big old tall oaks. Well, I was enjoying that shade, felt pretty good. Horse was kind of enjoying it, he wasn't sweating. And we just sauntering along. Got back there, and you had to go across the cattle crossing. Now, for those of you that don't know what a cattle crossing is, that's where they dig out a piece of the driveway, and they lay this, looks like a round pipe gate, they lay it down on the ground. And what that's for is so you can let your livestock, your pigs and your cows, your horses, run loose. Instead of putting a gate across there, you had a cattle crossing. Livestock won't go across that. They're afraid they break a leg or something, so they won't go across it. So it's called a lazy man's gate. That's what we always called it. Well, we come to that there, so we went down the ditch. When we come up, there was that vapor again. Looked like, kind of like a foggy vapor. We went through it, and as soon as we got on the other side of it, this house was all beautiful and painted. Fresh driveway. Beautiful. There were 2 vehicles, a truck and a car, sitting there in the driveway, and we rode up there and got off the horses, and Dad tied the horse to a tree, and here come this old man and old woman out of the house. Well, they was tickled to death to have visitors. I won't dare use their name because they've been long since gone too, but they want their family to come after me. So we'll just leave their names unknown. As they come off the porch, they run out there, and the old woman give my dad a hug, and the old man put his hand out, great big old burly hand, and shook my dad's hand and patted him on the shoulder, and he said, "Long time no see, boy." He goes, "Who's that little one there you got with you?" Dad said, "Oh, hell, that's Henry. That's my shadow." So I stepped out and put my little tiny hand inside of his big bear paw and shook his hand, and then the old woman come around. She goes, "Get out of the way there, old man. My turn." Well, before she picked me up, she grabbed me by the cheeks. I thought she was going to pinch my damn cheeks off. And she smiled real big and opened up her arms and said, "Here, come here." She wanted to give me a hug. Well, hell, I didn't even know her, but okay with me. At least she wasn't whipping my ass. So I got up there and got me a big bear hug. She took me by the hand. She goes, "Come up on the porch with me?" I said, "Yeah." So I followed her and her husband and my dad up on the porch. The guy sat over there by the spit tune. Dad threw cigarette butts in there, and that man there was walking with spit, and it sounded like somebody threw a rock in it. Me and the old woman sat at the other side of the door. We was all sitting there, and they was a-talking, and she goes, "Well, where in the hell's my manners? I know you want a beer. You want a lemonade or a chocolate milk?" I was like, "Yeah." "Well, come on, you got to follow me in the house." Fine by me. So we opened up the door there, the old screen door, and there was a parlor. And just beyond the parlor was the living room, and then right behind it was the kitchen. So we go in there, and she puts me some stuff on a plate and gets me my glass, and "You better take this here beer out to your dad. He might get rusty pipes waiting on you." So I took his beer out there and hastily dropped it off to him, and I run back in there to get something to eat. I like food. So we sitting at the table talking, and she said, "Well, hold on just a second." She went over there by the kitchen window, by the sink, and turned the radio on. It was a station from back in 1950-something. I'd never heard the likes. But it was old music like old Hank Williams Sr. and people like that. I didn't mind because I knew that kind of music. So we sat there and listened to the music softly, and they give the weather, and I just kind of half-ass paid attention and got done. Me and the missus went outside on the porch, and Dad goes, "Well, we better get going. You look like you got a full belly. You probably be asleep time we get home." So I didn't argue. We said our goodbyes, and I thanked the lady. Went out there and just got on the horse. And she goes, "Hey, it gets kind of lonely around here. You know, our kids don't come around anymore, and nobody ever comes down this old lane. Why, you the first people we've seen in God knows how long. Y'all come back and visit?" "Sure." So, again, Dad had a tear rolling down his cheek. So we headed back down that long lane, come into that mist, and went down alongside the cattle crossing and come up on the other side of the cattle crossing, so because the horse wouldn't want to cross it, he'd want to jump it. Dad had beer in that saddlebag. He wasn't going to have that shook up. That beer was like oxygen to him. So we headed south, headed back home along the highway, and come past the old white house that we had just stopped at, and it was all vacant looking, and it didn't faze me. My dad just kind of looked over there and turned his head and looked toward the field on the opposite side. I knew it kind of bothered him, but didn't faze me. So we headed on home, got back to the barn, put the horse in there, and Took all the saddle and bridle and stuff off of him, saddle blanket, put them in their place where they go, and fed and watered both horses, and proceeded to walk back to the house. We'd done this umpteen times that week. Come Saturday morning, my mom had to run up north to the little village up there, little town, and do a little bit of banking and pick up some odds and ends groceries and some stuff from the hardware store. So my dad had something else to do, so I had to go with my mom, which wasn't bad. I always got candy and stuff, but it wasn't like being with my dad. He was more relaxed about things. Mom, she'd whop you a good one. So my favorite was to go with my dad. But I got in the car, no arguments. We headed up the road, and sure enough, we come to that old white run-down house on the left-hand side of the road going north. I say, we was just up here the other day, seen these people a couple times. My mom said, what are you back there rattling on about? Back in those days, they didn't have car seats. She'd be lucky if you got strapped in with a seatbelt, because hell, most cars didn't even have seatbelts. So I sat back there playing my trucks and stuff. She goes, come again, what did you just say? I said, we were just at that house the other day, several times this week. She said, I don't know what you're talking about back there, but she said, that house been empty for years, so long I can't remember nobody even living there. I said, well, I asked Dad. We rode horses up here, and I went in there and ate. My dad sat there in the porch drinking beer, smoking cigarettes beside the guy with the spittoon and a big old chew in. And that's whenever he'd spit, it'd go ping. Sound like somebody shot that thing with a BB gun. She goes, you are so full of shit. I said, no, I'm telling you, we was there. She goes, your lying ain't gonna get you nowhere, boy. Except for a good ass whipping. I said, if I was you, I wouldn't whip me for that, because you do. We get home, my dad probably whip your ass. So before you go whipping anybody's ass for lying, you better make sure they're lying. Don't whip somebody that's innocent. I said, my dad won't put up with that. She goes, I'm going to turn around right up here, and I'm going to take you back to that house, and I'm going to prove to you that house is empty, then I'm going to beat your ass. I said, well, you just turn the car around and head back there. You'll find out. So she goes up the road, and she goes, you heard what I told you? And I said, yeah, and you heard what I told you. Turn the car around. So she turned around, and we headed back, and she pulled up in that driveway, and she goes, you hear them weeds scraping underneath the car? Yeah. She goes, ain't been nobody living here for years. Let's just go in. She goes, I ain't going up there. I said, well, come on, I'll show you. I know those people. I opened the gate, walked up there, and lo and behold, right there on the bench where I'd been sitting was my billfold. My mom didn't know what to say. I put my billfold up, and she would let me see that. She looked it all over, and I always carried this $2 bill in there that my grandpa gave to me. He told me, don't never spend that, boy. So Mom looked in there and found that $2 bill. She closed it back up and handed it back to me. I put it in my back pocket. Hell, I didn't even know I lost it. So she's not knowing what to say. We walk out there, and I said, right here. This is that post my dad tied that horse up to of mine. She goes, well, then where's the horse tracks? I said, right there, look. She looked down, and sure enough, there was 4 hoof prints. She didn't know what to say. We got back in the car and headed on uptown. The whole way, she grilled me. I kept telling her. I said, we do this all the time. Dad wants to go back in time, see these people that passed on. Don't bother me to open a portal and take him back. I said, it's something that's natural. So she goes, we'll talk about this on the way home. Then I'm going to have a talk with your dad and you. Whatever. So we go to the bank. I get a little bit of candy in there. We went to the grocery store, the old Kroger's. Done a little shopping. Got her bag of groceries and come out. So then we went to the hardware store on the other side of the square. She went in and got some fuses and a couple other things, some liquid Drano. We went back in, got in the car, and just got around the edge of city limits. She goes, and where else did you guys stop when you were horseback riding? I said, I'll show you. She goes, did your dad know these people? I was like, yeah, they knew him. I said, but they didn't know me. Till Dad told him my name and told me I was his son. So I said, I guess they knew him before I ever come along. What was her name? So I told her. Dude, she turned about 4 shades of white. Her mouth come open, looked like she was going to catch a fly. So we come on down and made the place they call Dead Man's Corner. It's a real sharp corner there on the highway. We're coming south. And just probably about 250, 275 feet, there was that long driveway. So I told her, I said, up here, put your blinker on left and pull in there. She goes, no field road. I said, pull in there. She goes, is this where you guys was going to? I said, yeah, this is the other place. She pulls in there and she stopped and she goes, I only see a field road. I don't see no road that goes on back there. I said, see them 2 big rows of oak trees? Yep. I said, look way back in there. See that old foundation? See that old house back there with the pillars? She goes, what old house? I said, you don't see that house back there. Well, I don't see nothing back there. I said, oh, wait a minute. So I adjusted my frequency and she didn't know what to think. She got kind of dumbfounded looking, and all of a sudden the vapor started coming up and like a fog around us. Temperature kind of changed a little bit. All of a sudden she rubbed her eyes and she goes, if I look one more time that house ain't there, I'm going to get out and I'll whip your little ass right here. I said, look. Sure enough, she looked back there and there was that big white house with the big pillars. Car and a truck back there. There were 2 old people standing on the porch looking up at the end of the driveway. She goes, get me the hell out of here. I don't know what you did, but you get me the hell out of here. This ain't funny. Okay. I said, just back up onto the highway. She backs up, and the vapor leaves and the fog leaves, and we proceed to go on south to the house. We got home. My dad's sitting there at the kitchen table. We walk in, and he goes, well, where's the groceries and stuff at? You guys need help carrying them in? She said, we got bigger things to talk about. Henry, get your ass over there in that chair and sit down. Don't you be taking off. You get in here. I walked in there, and I started to pull up a chair, and I thought, I better go sit my dad. That way, if one of us gets our ass whipped, both of us will get it, hopefully. I wasn't going to be the only one to get an ass whipping that day. So I stood there by Dad, and he put his arm around me, and he goes, well, what the hell's the problem? She goes, what have you guys been doing this past week? He goes, riding horses. Why? She goes, to where? That's, well, up the road. She goes, any place particular? He looks at me and I'm looking at him like, uh-oh, we're both dead meat. He goes, really? Not really. She goes, I beg to differ. He just kind of looked at her and he goes, well, might as well go ahead and tell you. Sounds like you already know. He goes, I got to missing these two people, these two separate families. And he said, I wanted to see them. So me and Henry would ride up there, and at the house on the left up there, the old house, you know, had the fence around it. Henry took me back in time to see them. Then we went on up the road to the right. He took me back to see those families. Of course, he called them by name. My mom looked at me and she goes, you two ain't to take off no more. From now on, you're going to the babysitter right there across the driveway. When I go to work, you'll go there and stay. You know, he took me up the road and told me about this here because I made him. And so I thought I called him a liar. So on the way back, he told me to pull in there, and I pulled in there, and he goes, you see that house back there? She said, I didn't see a damn thing. And so all of a sudden he goes, look again. He said, I noticed there's fog and the steam-looking vapors roll in. And so when I looked, right before I looked over there, I told him I would whip his ass for lying if I looked. And so when I looked, sure enough, there's that house with the big pillars. But Dad goes, yeah, that's such and such house. He said they died back in the early 50s. He said they was good people, so he said, I just figured since Henry likes to jump time, he'd just take me back there to that time and let me see these people. My mom goes, don't you ever worry? But what's the difference? We sold him out to a place and they jump him through time, so since he knows how to do it, why can't we reap from that? Of course, back then I didn't know any different. I thought I was doing a good job, which I guess I was. He got what he wanted, but all I got was a smile and a pat on the back. Stupid me, I should have been getting paid for it. So, from then on I had to go to the babysitter. She was a mean old German woman. She knew her way around a belt and a person's ass, too. I got several swats for jumping across the highway to get the mail when she told me not to. It's my mailbox, I go get the mail out of there. And she whipped my ass a few times. But she quit babysitting for me after a few years because she come after me with a belt one time, and cause I went across the highway to get the mail again. I decided that day I wasn't taking an ass whooping, and as I went out across the yard, she seen what looked like a fog vapor, and I run into it. As soon as I went into it, it closed up and dissipated. My God. She looked for me, I guess, for hours. I waited until my mom and dad come home and popped out inside the house. I had no clue that she was going to come back over. And I'm thinking, all right, man, I'm safe. My dad's home. I'm going to sit here by him and laugh. That old German woman come in. She was so mad she was spitting German phrases out. I had no damn clue what the hell she was saying. I kind of smiled a little bit, looked at my dad, and he was sitting over there laughing. He goes, boy, I think you better go hide. You're about to get your ass whipped. I said, nah, she wouldn't touch me sitting here by you. You ain't going to let her touch me, are you? He goes, I don't know. She looked pretty pissed off. She opened that screen door and knocked on the other door, and Mom hard come in. Wanted to know what this is all about. She didn't say shit. She run over there to where I was at, grabbed me by the arm, lift me up, and beat my ass. My dad was sitting there just laughing. So she told my mom and dad what I did, and they said, we'll take care of it. He just liked to do a little magic once in a while. The lady said, magic how? He disappeared. She goes, yeah, we'll have a talk with him. So the old woman went home baffling to herself, something in German. I didn't understand. Hell, she might have been cussing me out. Who knows? Maybe she thought I was Satan or something. So I was wiping my nose and wiping my tears. Dad goes, you can't be doing that shit. You're going to get everybody in trouble, and that's the way it's going to be. Well, I didn't understand, because at the projects, they was always happy when I did it. So I figured, hell, that's the way it's supposed to be, You have these gifts, these powers, you should be able to use them as long as you ain't hurting nobody. I didn't figure I was hurting nobody. I didn't know the old woman really wasn't mad, she just worried. And sometimes people, when they get worried, they show it in different ways. And her way was just to beat my ass. And she did. She beat my ass like it was a drum. Played a hell of a tune, she did. I didn't appreciate it back then, but it's been years since she passed away, and sometimes I think about that old German woman. She could be a loving old woman, or boy, she could be a holy terror. I've seen her on both sides. She's a good old woman, though. But I had to stop what I was doing out in public. I thought it was funny. The way I figured it, she was faster than me, and she was bigger than me, and she was going to beat my ass. Well, I did what any kid would have done. I was just trying to get away. It just so happened that I opened a portal and went into it. Well, she didn't find that amusing. She was one of them old-time Germans, Everything that wasn't holy was holy hell. But that was back then. She asked me about it one time when I seen her and she was real old. Years later, and I thought I'd explain it to her, and I thought, nah, she wouldn't get it. So I just told her I said it was just a parlor trick. And just left it at that so she could die in peace. Otherwise, hell, she might have went to her grave worrying about it. What I was going to do next, if I was going to sprout horns and a tail. So, I was told not to do that kind of stuff. And every so often, I'd slip up. And I'd do something I wasn't supposed to be doing. And I'd end up paying for it. Usually with an ass chewing, which was worse than an ass whooping. An ass whooping you can get over with just after a few minutes because your ass quits stinging. Those tongue lashings, gee, I'd rather have somebody beat me in the head with a sledgehammer rather than listen to an ass chewing. Because they don't just go on for like 2 or 3 sentences. It's usually 10 or 15 paragraphs of ass chewing. It's always the same shit over and over again. It's like at least change the sentence. Oh no. A good ass chewing is like a harp. It just keeps playing the same damn tune. Of course, it usually ain't a tune I want to hear. So, that's the story of what happened with that and the portal incident. One of the many portal times I opened up and had to pay the price for it. Of course, us guys are hard-headed. Even as little kids were hard-headed as hell. Yeah, we learned how to go to the bathroom better than them girl babies do. Of course, we can stand up and whiz in the weeds. But them girls got to take all this off and squat down and hang on to something. We may have been easy to potty train, but little boys are just hard-headed. And when we get older, that hard-headedness just seems to get thicker. So, that's the story of that portal. There's a lot more to come. Stay tuned. Thank you and have a good night.